Welcome to this red and yellow lunchtime lecture. It's great to have you all here. I see the participants are just streaming in at the moment, so I'll take a few minutes just to do an intro as people get themselves comfy. But red and yellow, our purpose really is to change the world through education. And we do this through multiple different mediums. One of those is by providing these free lunchtime lectures where you get the opportunity to eat your lunch and learn something. And today we are extremely excited to be hosting Andre van Kets. He's a friend of the school. We really are excited to have him here today. Andre is the co-founder and digital director of online travel company Discover Africa Group. It was established in 2002. Discover Africa Group helps thousands of travelers plan their holidays and safaris to Africa each year via their platforms drivesouthafrica.com and discoverafrica.com. Andre is a content marketing and SEO guru and will be sharing some of his best kept how to rank on Google secrets. He'll show what's worked and what hasn't worked over the last 17 years in the game. And it's at this stage then that I'm going to welcome Andre van Kets. Andre, it's a great privilege to have you here with us today. And I'm going to hand over to you, sir.
Right. Thank you, Wesley, for that kind intro. And really nice to see you and speak to all the red and yellow fans out there. It was about a year ago that we spoke at the tourism event. Covered some of the SEO nitty gritty there to a tourism audience. And I hope I'm going to be able to share some of my knowledge gained over the last sort of 20 years with all of you today. If you haven't guessed yet, I am working in lockdown from home from the tiny little bedroom wardrobe closet of my wife's. And yeah, this is where I've been posted for the last 3 or 4 months. And it's been fun. It's been quite a challenge, this lockdown, but a lot of cool stuff that has come out of it. And I'm going to share some of that today with you. I've been in online travel. I'm a computer geek. I just live and breathe the internet. And I live and breathe travel. So I've applied my passion and my skills sort of together. But over the last couple of months, 3-4 months, tourism's really been hit hard. This is literally our traffic graph from when our little furry friend over here arrived. And what we've done in the last 3-4 months is use this chance to kind of review our own site and improve their SEO. And it's given us the chance to go back to basics. And Rick, who's also actually on the call, then will be around to field some questions later, has worked very closely with me to do some of these things I'm about to walk you through. What we've also done out of it is we've launched a little agency that specializes in helping other companies improve their SEO, improve their content marketing, improve their digital and UX experience. And we've called it Discover Digital. We don't know how long we're going to need to keep doing this for. When that graph starts turning up again and the planes start flying, we'll get there. So if you have questions after this, we're happy to chat about it and you can reach out to me directly. So we've got 3 weeks coming up, and this week we're going to look at the fundamentals. I'll get deep in a few topics, but not too deep in each of them. And next week we'll go on a little bit more advanced route, and then the last week still sort of to be decided. We're going to see where the audience wants to go. Maybe we'll do a live review. Maybe we'll dig into something like site migrations, which are often a hairball for people out there. And I'll also try and sort of gear all the talks to newbies, maybe students that have never sort of built a site or never worked at a company where the web is a key channel, but it definitely will also be geared for businesses that are operating and have an existing website that is a key channel. So right to basics, what is SEO? I'm using an acronym, search engine optimization. They're not about optimizing the search engines, but optimizing your own site, your own platform for the search engines. It used to be, I'm talking 15, 20 years ago when we started, a very technical role. You had to write code. You had to understand algorithms. You had to do all those kinds of things. You still need to know all those things, but you need to bring a lot more of the human, the UX, the real world factors in. And this is where it gets quite interesting. SEO is not a few things. It's not social media. It's not necessarily cat memes. It's not paying to have that first 3 or 4 positions on Google. It's earning that very first next position that you don't have to pay for. And that's kind of the big premise here. Why does SEO matter? Maybe it's an obvious question, but Google is still the biggest driver of traffic online. I think YouTube is number 2 and the social platforms thereafter. But if you're not present on Google, it's going to be very hard for your business to succeed. And And doing it right is not rocket science. It's a process. It's a set of tasks one has to follow. And when they all blend together, it's when the magic happens. So we're gonna have a look at that. But to start with, the absolute fundamentals of people ask me, how do you rank in Google? How do you get to the top? And the best way to do that is to understand how the search engine themselves works. And I like to use a very simple analogy to explain that. It's kind of like when you walk into a library. I don't know if students still go into libraries and look for books. I certainly did in my day. And I go with my daughter to the library now to pick out her favorite books. But to use an analogy, I've got in fact, I picked up a couple of books out of my bookshelf here, my 3 hiking books. And if you think of your website as a book, right here, it's got front cover, it's got a spine, it's got table of contents, a whole bunch of words on the inside, a couple of drawings. And really what you want to try and do is give Google the best shot of identifying your book, knowing what it's about, and reading the book. Their bots, their crawlers are reading the content they cite. And if you can help Google do that, they can actually recommend your book to users on that page 1 of Google, those first 10 spots. So we'll get to the details, but I just want to bear this analogy in mind that Google is like this librarian that runs through a massive library, looks at the spine of every single book lined up in those shelves, scans the spine, magically pulls the book out, scans every word, every image, every little thing in that book, puts it back in and jumps onto the next book and stores it in its memory. And the easier you make that process for Google to pick up that book, read it, and know what it's about, the better for your site. Now, it's not going to speak to the content of your site or how well the words are written or how easy the book is to use. I mean, those old encyclopedias were massive. They were full of content, but they're so heavy to pick up. The font was so tiny. It's so hard to read. So, the UX, think of that as sort of design, is actually a part of SEO also. It's not just the technical stuff anymore. And another very simple example, if you consider that, all these books are stacked up in the library, all you can see is the spine. I've got one where it's armchair hiking in the Western Cape. This one's Table Mountain, but even the image is like, you can't even read the text on the background image. It's not made easy. So it's all about making it easy for the search engines. And if you can do that, you're well on your way. Right. So let's just keep that book library analogy in mind as we go through. And today's talk sort of in 2 parts. I'm going to focus on this first part, which is getting your site ready to rank, especially when you're building a new site or you've got a site that's 2 or 5 or 10 years old and it's not doing what you want. You can do all you want in terms of links and content and the ongoing work. And an agency will pitch a 50,000 Rand a month retainer bill at you to try and uplift your rankings. You can do all that ongoing work till you're blue in the face. If you haven't done the foundational stuff right, it's like trying to launch a hot air balloon with dead weights stuck to the bottom. So we're going to focus on that first step of making that hot air balloon optimal, cutting all the dead weights, filling it with hot air, and then when you're on a month-to-month basis, doing great work and great content and great link building, that balloon can take off. Today's talk is sort of broken up into these 8 main sections. It should be fairly easy to follow, and Wesley, please jump in and speed me up if you think I'm dragging on, but I think we're good for 30 minutes or so. And we're going to touch on all of them. Like I said, we'll go a little bit deeper on some. Rick, please make some notes if I leave anything off as we go through. Maybe we can bring them through at the end. But without too much delay, I'll run through this slide very quickly with that book analogy. So choosing the right CMS or content management system and setting up correctly is key. It's like those annoying, to use the book analogy, you get books that are really like light and easy and you can page through them, or you get those flip files with a ring binder that always gets stuck and then you can't open it and the pages are awkward and difficult. Choosing the right CMS is important, but using it correctly is key. The keywords is like the words you use on your page. There's the keywords. It's day walks in and around Cape Town. I'm talking about walking in Cape Town. The spine says exactly the same. The cover says the same. The table of contents, page 1 says the same. It's about using the right keywords and choosing the right keywords to make sure it makes sense. This book's called Table Mountain Activity Guide. It's a bit broader. Is it hiking? Is it climbing? What activities does it include? I don't know, but anyway, so what I'm getting is choosing keywords and applying them to your site is paramount. Then on-page SEO is probably something anyone that's worked with an agency has heard about. This is where the code, making sure your HTML is correct and we'll look at some great examples of the 10 or 15 things that must be on page for a site to succeed. We'll look at content. That's kind of blending the keywords into the HTML, and then you've got your content on site. And links is also essential. It's like, in fact, the link aspect of Google's algo started with with citation theory, which is in academia, all professors and academics had to publish a certain amount of articles every year, or papers, as they call them. And the papers that got mentioned the most in other papers were the ones that were kind of recognized as something valuable and important, because everyone is talking about that other guy's piece of research. So a link on the web is equivalent as a citation of one paper pointing to another. To keep it sort of more current, if a whole bunch of mates are talking about a new restaurant and everyone's saying, go there, go there, go there, you've got to try it out, that's like a link. It's a vote of confidence. It's a signal to Google that's curating all of these restaurants or things on the web that this place has got lots of links. It's probably more important or more valuable or more relevant than this other place that's got fewer links and fewer mentions. Speed. Now this, fast sites obviously are good for users. We know that. No one likes staring at a little spinner on a screen. And we'll dive into that a little bit. But it's also now a ranking factor, which is key. And user experience, or UX, is also a kind of newer thing, which people didn't worry too much about 3 or 4 years ago. It's the tiny font. It's when you're a mobile device and you find it hard to press that button because it's too small, or it's too close to that other button. Those frustrations aggravate users, and Google is rewarding sites that do those things well, and they bump them up in the rankings and drop those ones which clearly aggravate users because people are just leaving the sites or not staying long on them. And then the last point that we'll cover is the Google tools that are freely available for all of us to use. Google provides immense insights, and if you just knew where to go and research them, you can use them. So that's the agenda for today. And again, just keep that book library analogy in mind as we go. All right, so the CMS and setting up your site correctly. I had a question literally yesterday from a company we've been working with, and they say, from a technical SEO perspective, do you think it's a good idea to use Squarespace, or should we stick to WordPress? I get a question like this: WordPress, Joomla, Drupal, Shopify, WooCommerce, what's the best one for SEO? It doesn't really matter. It does matter to a small extent, but it's more about how you use the tool, not the tool. 5-10 years ago, there were good and bad CMSs. Nowadays, almost all of them do these foundational things that we're going to cover today fairly well. It's just about how you do them. There's an article here which I've referenced that you can jump on, and it kind of lists all the good CMSs and what to look out for. It's a really nice detailed thing from Aleda Solis, a well-recognized SEO in the industry. And like I said, it's not the size or type of CMS that matters, it's how you use it. So here's a good example. Last year when I spoke at Red and Yellow, at the tourism event, I spoke to Andrew Russell, came up to me after and said, Andre, I'm doing this site for Christo Brunt, one of Mandela's old prison wardens. He's doing talks and tourism functions, but my site won't rank. I just can't see it. It's been live for a year or something like that. And I said, you know what, Russell, Andrew, I'll hop on and have a look. And it was as simple as logging into WordPress, going onto the settings page, then the read page, and then there's this little tick box that says discourage search engines from indexing the site. I just unchecked that box, voila. Within a week, the site was ranking. So it's not to say I'm a hero or anything. It's just that knowing how to use the tool is the right thing. Bad mechanic blames his tool. All these tools have got ways to control and do SEO right. So it is very possible. And then Red and Yellow, I'm going to pick on you now. I'm sorry, Wesley. But when I wanted to share the link for this webinar with a few friends, I didn't have it to hand or the registration link. So I went to Google, I typed in Red and Yellow lunchtime lectures. There's the Google paid ads. The first link I clicked on looked like the right thing for me. And I could tell fairly quickly that this was a WordPress site and there was no meaty information here. Like, where's the link? Where's the content? And I realized quickly that this is the page for the image. It was ranking the image loaded into WordPress higher than the page about the lunchtime talks. So image optimization, well done, Red and Yellow, well done, WordPress. But I then want to know, well, where is this information? So I went to the events page on Red and Yellow. And this is just an example of how a CMS can be used correctly or poorly. So what I worked out is that on the events page, Red and Yellow's got this cool little automatic event calendar thing where as they upload events, it magically appears on this page. There's today's talk. There's the one for tomorrow, next week. Wonderful for the user that eventually finds it. But Googlebot cannot index this page. This is probably rendered by JavaScript because it's some sort of plugin that pulls from a content calendar or from Zoom. This is something I would fix if I was in Red and Yellow's shoes. So yeah, just an example of how using plugins and add-ons that aren't SEO compliant can hurt you. Not end of the world. I found the info I was looking for, but this is low-hanging fruit. Like you could fix this in a couple of hours, straightforward work. Okay, there we go. Like I said, I'm sorry about that, guys. So to summarize some CMS and setup considerations, it's the cost of the CMS, not just whether it's free or not, but the cost of developers to run it. How easy to use it is critical because if it's really hard to like upload a new piece of content, you're going to have less content going on the site, or your team's going to be reluctant to use it. So make it super easy to use. Speed of the site's critical. We'll get there in a second. Adding plugins can slow sites down, and the extendability of a CMS is important. Doing it as a custom CMS versus an established one. There's pros and cons to that. And nowadays it's headless CMSs, which is quite the rage, where you can actually have your content live and accessible via an API. For large, really big brands, it's quite a valuable way of isolating your content from your delivery platform. So a couple other little setup tips and tools. If you're not sure if your site is being blocked like Christo's site was, you just type in site : and then your site name into the Google search bar, and they'll tell you how many results you've got. Please make sure you've got HTTPS, a secure connection to your site. If you don't, Google will downward rank your site, up to 36% increase when you do go from non to full HTTPS. Please make sure your site's mobile friendly. I mean, we can all kind of see if it's mobile friendly, and most of us do a decent job of going there these days, but Google's got great tools to help you fix the tiny little things that are wrong and maybe you don't spot. Mobile first is critical. Last year it was up to 54% on our platforms. I think this year we're looking at 60% of mobile traffic versus desktop. Yeah, and that's kind of the setup stuff that you really have to think of. A few more items, but I think for foundational, that's fine. Okay, I'm gonna have to speed things up here because I can see that I'm slow on time. Keywords. So keyword research is the task of identifying which are the words you should be ranking for. There's lots of great tools out there that are free, like these two. And then the one I love to use is Sem Rush. So I'm just going to quickly show you what a tool like keyword research like this can do. So if you type in the word cat memes, it'll return a list of keywords, that one, as well as other recommended ones. Grumpy cat, crying cat, funny cat memes, white cat memes, all these things. But more importantly, it gives you a bunch of columns with some data that you can use. So I'm going to zoom in and just show you that this column is volume. And that means the number of searches per month for that search term. The trend is kind of obvious to see, it looks like there's been a lot of more searches for memes during lockdown. KD is keyword difficulty, I believe. So if something is a lot of people searching it, but it's very competitive, it might not be worth trying to target that keyword. Maybe find something that's a little less competitive, only in the 80s, not up in the 90s. Even though it's got lower search volume, it might be a bit more relevant or more realistic to target that keyword. Then the Sem Rush and all these tools have got other ways of discovering new search terms: cat breeds, meowing cats, cute cats. But sometimes the easiest one is right in front of us. We use it every day. You type into Google and it auto completes for you. So as you start typing cat meme, you can see all the other things that you could be targeting. Now, it doesn't give you data, doesn't give you volume and keyword difficulty, but it gives you ideas. And these new words could be seeds for another round of research and uncovering more hidden opportunities. Even cat memes in lockdown. What a great thing. That didn't exist 6 months ago. And clearly it's quite high up on the list to target. Probably not too many people doing it. So if you're in the cat meme industry, go for it. Here's a real world example of data for one of our recent clients under Discover Digital, where they offer online training for health spas and beauty spas. They've got a membership program, and we researched all the keywords related to spa management, spa courses, certification, online training, and here's the search terms. And then we said, well, the site's got 4 or 5 pages. Let's try and group these together to corresponding pages. And then on the next page, you can see how the first 2 we're going to use on the About page. The next 3, because they're all quite similar, course and courses, we can bundle those together and target that phrase on the homepage. So you see where I'm already headed, that it's not just about what keywords you want to tackle, you also want to start assigning them to the right pages so you can focus on those keywords on those particular pages. A book, for example, doesn't just waffle everywhere. Each section, each page has got a focus, and we've got to try and bring that focus to our page on our site so individual pages can rank for individual search terms. Okay, now where and how to use these keywords. Why do I write curveballs? That's funny, Rob. You'll know what I'm talking about. So keywords on a site. Here are the 15 or so places that you can use your keywords on a page. You can use it in the URL, you can use it in the breadcrumbs, you can use it in the, not in the search, but search needs to work. Use it in the body copy as alt tags of images. This stuff you can search online. In fact, this article is great because it creates a visual of all the places your keyword needs to land. As an example, I think I searched highlights of Botswana. I know that our Safari site has got a page dedicated to that. Here we are in position 1, just underneath, or position 2, under Lonely Planet, which is great. When I open up that page, I see that the title tag is, or the heading of the page is highlights of Botswana. I'll go Control F and search on the page and see that, hey, this is only used twice on the page, in the breadcrumbs, the body. I thought it was used somewhere else down here too, but maybe I'm mistaken. And it's used in the URL, and it's used up here in the title of, in the Chrome tab. So we're doing a decent job. Maybe there's an alt tag over some of these images that mention highlights of Botswana, but it's obviously good enough for this relatively low volume search term to get the number 1 or number 2 position. When we go for a phrase like Botswana Safari, there's three companies out there bidding for that position. Then a couple of our competitors, and I see here we are at position 5 or 6. And we open that up, and I search the term Botswana Safari on the page. We mention it 10 times. Heading, right below the heading, in a button, secondary navigation, breadcrumbs, probably another few times throughout this page. And even with this degree of usage on the page, or keyword density, which is kind of the term used, we can still only achieve position 5 or 6. But the key is that ranking is not only about the keywords on the page, it's a whole lot more. It's about the links to the page. It's about UX, it's about speed, about all those factors. Now, if you get each of those factors right, you can imagine yourself climbing to the top of Google. So yeah, that's just an illustration of how the keywords play a role on page. Wow, I could look at those images all day. All right, so another little tidbit, you can also spy on your competitors to see what keywords they use. Sem Rush has got a great tool, and this is quite an interactive sort of diagram that shows, I think red and yellow is this little dot down here, where they've got good organic keywords, higher than 3 or 4 of their competitors. But look at these guys, Vega School. They have got a much bigger bubble. They sort of beat red and yellow on organic keyword reach and organic traffic. So maybe it's time to have a look at what Vega has that you guys don't have. And maybe you can move that bubble up and to the right. Some of these some of these tools also have great competitor things like Nike versus Adidas. You can have a head-on-head comparison and learn from your direct competitors, see what they're doing and bring it into your keyword list. All right, next one, on-page SEO. Again, I'm going to use this image repeatedly through because it's not just about the keywords, it's also about the tags. So here we have the heading, and it's important that we use an H1, and it's important that we use the H2, and you use anchor text on a link, and it's important that stuff lives above the fold and below the fold. All of these things matter. So this is not a, you can't dive all the way and learn HTML in half an hour, but it's important to know that you can't just look at what's on face value on the front of the site. You also have to view source and see where those words exist on your page. For example, this is that all-important title tag, which every single page has on the site, and it's the equivalent to sort of the spine, or maybe you'd consider it to be the equivalent as the sort of I don't know, the table of contents, the main sections of a page or a site. It's essential that you put your keywords and the most important content into these places. For example, the main heading, the title tag, there we go, and that Chrome browser tab that I showed you earlier. All of these things really matter. URLs. Here's a great anecdote that Rick actually discovered working with us after joining us a couple of years ago. We were calling all of our safaris on that safari site of ours journeys, because they were life-changing experiences for people coming to Africa. And we thought we were being very clever and imaginative with calling our main product journeys. The reality is no one searches the word Botswana journey. Everyone searches Botswana safari. So all we did was we changed the slug, that part of the URL that was describing all of our tours and our safaris. We changed from journey to safari. Virtually overnight, our traffic doubled. It was at the tiniest little tweak, and it moved the needle massively. So these are the small things that, if everything else is sound, small things can really make a big difference. If everything else is shaky, the individual small things aren't always going to move the needle. I touched on keyword density earlier, and here's a little definition. So people always ask, what's the perfect keyword density? Some say 1 to 2%. The reality is, if you're reading a piece of copy and you're saying the word too many times, you're probably overdoing it, and Google can tell, and real users will tell. And if you're not saying it enough, Google's also not going to know that that page is about that. I mean, imagine the Table Mountain book didn't use the word Table Mountain 17 times a page. It wouldn't really do the topic justice. And by the way, Google's getting very good at picking up synonyms. So, you know, if we're calling Table Mountain by its other names, 12 Apostles or Hurikwacho or whatever it may be, Google has learned those over the years and knows to apply natural variances, and we need to use natural variances to create that sort of natural language equivalent. Okay, I'm moving through a bit quicker now. Let's see how we go. Content is key, and I will tackle this a little bit more in depth next week, and how you can use content to grow in the rankings. But for now, the foundational setup stuff is that you do need to make sure that the keywords land within the right structure, and that essentially is the content. And this is a single page that looks really good, but let's zoom out and think about all the pages on our site kind of need to work together and sing in unison. So this is sort of adding up all the parts where it's keywords, the page length. Imagine you've got two books in the library. One is a fat book about Table Mountain, and the other one's a tiny little thin one about Table Mountain. They've both got merits. The one you can take on the trail, the other one's great for research. But if a keyword leads us more towards like a pocketbook, maybe Google's going to serve the small thing. But if you're looking for a comprehensive article about the history of Table Mountain, then a long form piece, lots of content, might be a better result. And Google's pretty good at serving up the right stuff. The quality of your content, it can't just be waffle. It's got to be authoritative. And Google, trust me, they've got algorithms. If they can do face recognition and pick up cats and dogs and, you know, my best friends and all that kind of stuff, then it's very possible to, you know, for them to pick up patterns of text that are inauthentic or written by bots. The quantity of like I mentioned, how big the book is, how big your site is important. And it's not just this site's got 10 pages, that site's got 100 pages. Google looks at the velocity of new content added to a site. The site's got a ton of content, but it's been static for 2 years, versus a fairly new site that's doing all the other things right, and they're adding a new blog post a day or 2 or 3 a week. Google can recognize that, and it'll probably, you know, reward the freshness. I mean, that's what they talk about, freshness factor. So you can't just buy a whole bunch of content, dump it there, and hope you're going to do well. You've got to keep working at it. And this is also a newish thing, the last couple of years that's come out. It's called EAT, or EAT, where Google worked out a means of measuring expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness. Now, those are quite soft factors which an algorithm couldn't pick up by itself, but they set to work a huge team of people that were qualifying websites. They'd literally open up a site, they had a bunch of checklists, and they'd say, this site's got lots of ugly ads, or this site's got small fonts that I can't read, or this site loaded really slowly. And all those sort of criteria, they logged against these sites, and they used machine learning to map those characteristics to what they see, just like they use machine learning to recognize faces. And they now have used those inputs to develop their own ability to determine trustworthiness of a site based on a whole bunch of signals. And it's not that you can kind of bake it into your site over a week, I mean, you know, overnight, but we'll talk a little bit more about this next week, about how you can do the right things to build that trust. Okay, moving over to links, the other kind of big thing that needs to happen on an ongoing basis for a site to rank well over time, and we'll focus on that again next week. But just doing the foundational link stuff right is critical. Again, the links need to live in the right places on a page. Breadcrumbs are a great idea, because not only does it kind of tell you where you are, it also tells you where you came from. And it creates a degree of internal votes, like those restaurant recommendations, like those citations by the academics. The homepage, if it's at the top of the breadcrumbs on all pages of the site, especially a very large and deep site, will get the most links. And a deep, small, obscure page right at the bottom of the sort of tree or hierarchy will have fewer links to it. So those are all signals to tell Google that within my own site, these pages are more important than others. And then we've got to use them in the right places, in body copy, in the footer. Sometimes it's a good idea to put different types of links. So internal links are key. So here's sort of the checklist when you're setting up a site to make sure that your internal links are well structured, breadcrumbs, and not just relying on the navigation to move users around your site and let Google get around your site. Put those links in the body copy. When the word Cape Town is used, hyperlink to Cape Town. When your product is named, link to your product page. Don't assume everyone's going to go to products in the main menu, down, expand, out, down, expand. Users don't think like you think, don't move like you think they'll move on a site. They just read and they follow and they see what jumps at them. Anyway, anchor text is another key part, and I've got a slide on that in a sec. The URL that you're going from and to internally, and when you're linking outwards to other sites and other sites that link to you matter. So try and build links to the pages that you want to rank. Don't always build links to the homepage. You can have follow and no follow links. You can read more about that, but it's a means of Google to qualify whether a link is paid for, or if it's a sponsored link. That's a new attribute that can be used, versus truly natural links that are earned over time because you've got great content or your website is worthy. Your restaurant is worthy of recommendations. Your website is worthy of links. They kind of favor follow links over no follow. And of course, links are the way that Googlebot can crawl and index your site. Quantity, quality, and relevance of links, and even the location of links matter. If you get a lot of links from South African companies and you're a South African outfit, great. If you're trying to sell stuff in Europe, you should probably try and get links in Holland and Germany and so forth. Then quantity-wise or quality-wise, let's say you've got two websites, both are doing all the right things on my little diagram here. But one site has got 6 or 8 links and the other site's only got 2 links. This is how Google does that sort of vote counting and saying, you know what, I'm going to rank website A above website B. But what if that website B's got one really high quality link from a very authoritative source and the other site has lots of links, but they're quite rubbishy and quite spammy and all from low grade sites? Google knows how to interpret the quality of links. So it's vital that you don't just go out there and buy these cheap links from India and all the other promises. You actually work hard to earn legitimate links from good places. Anchor text, if anyone's not familiar, is the words that actually appear on the page that are clickable. And they live in the code between the anchor tags. That's where the name comes from. And just as a silly example, a lot of people use the words click here when they want people to click on something. But from a user perspective, it's actually not that useful because you're not telling the person what they're going to see on the other side of that click here. So try and use meaningful words to help your users. And believe it or not, it helps the bots and helps Google know what's on the other side of the link. So try to get people to link to you with the words you want to rank for. I mean, it sounds obvious, but it really makes a difference. And to show you how the kind of click here thing works, I remember a while ago, someone said, if you search click here in Google, the #1 site that used to come up was Adobe Acrobat's page, because almost every site that ever said download Adobe Acrobat to view this doc used the word click here. So that showed how, although they got nothing to do with click here, the term, the thing, then if there's enough links pointing to you with those terms in it, you can rank to the top. So here's a whole, and I just want to show you something very curious. So here's a whole bunch of articles that come up now and says, don't say click here, not everyone will be clicking. Why you should never say click here. So all these articles are basically saying the same thing. I went over to page 2 to see what ranked at the top. A couple of more. Dawn Parcel Tracking. That's a South African website that obviously has click here on it. And where else did I see something interesting? Adobe was here on page 2 for me when I searched this earlier. Anyway, not coming through now. They still were there at some point. Maybe, oh, here we go. It was on, sorry, page 1, number 7. Adobe Acrobat still links there. And then the government's coronavirus page rank. Oh, no, here it is. Position 3, right from the top, is this brand new site. It's been around for 3 months. in South Africa, or 4 months in South Africa. Now, when you search on Google in South Africa for the word click here, this site comes up because every single site in South Africa has been asked to link to this site. And 80% of the people out there use the word click here, not view coronavirus page from website. That just shows the power of anchor text. Curious little thing. Anyway, I geek out on this kind of stuff and I need to keep going. So link tools, I think we've got 2 more sections to go. Sem Rush is an amazing links tools and it's going to get you, I do want to show you one little thing. So here's SA coronavirus in Sem Rush's dashboard, where you can see they've earned 28,000 links in such a short time. Check out this graph. Red and yellow, been going for a little bit longer. 500 pages, websites that link to them with 3,000 backlinks. And it indicates scores like authority, search traffic, an amazing dashboard. This is where you see that sort of competitive tool coming in that I mentioned. So this is one of these tools that we kind of can't live without as SEOs. Hugely valuable, and it shows the power of links to uplift the site and get rankings. Okay, speed is key. Back in almost 2 years ago now, Google publicly announced that the speed of your site will impact rankings, not just for ranking's sake, but if your site loads in 3 or 4 or 5 seconds time, like most of our websites do, trust me, especially if you're on a mobile device, 3G connection, you're going to have, on average, an e-commerce site will have, call it 2% conversion rate or 2.2. You can bring your speed from 4 seconds down to 2 or even 1 second. You can go from 2% conversion rate to 6% conversion rate. That is 3 times the revenue or 3 times the engagement on your sites. No matter what you're selling, what you're doing, speed is great for users, and Google is going to push you right to the top if you do that right. Here are 3 great tools you can use. My favorite is Google's very own one, PageSpeed's Insights. It tells you after you've entered your domain, your website, exactly what you need to do. These things look kind of cryptic. Avoid excess DOM size, minify JavaScript. Sounds like I'm speaking Greek, but really what it means, if you've got a coder or someone that can help you, it's simple things like compressing your images. Clean up your code and make it small. Don't have all that empty white space or code you don't need. Upgrade your hosting. So many of us, our web agencies or clients, just put us on the cheapest shared hosting environment you can. As soon as you start hitting more than 5 or 10 or 15 concurrent visitors on your site, that PHP, that hosting environment cannot handle it. Add caching to your site and implement a CDN. This starts getting a little bit more advanced. You need a developer to help you with these things. But trust me, we did it recently. I saw red and yellow scores at 13 on the scale of 100. Sorry, guys, for the bad news, but you can fix it very easily. It'll help. Get smarter. I don't know if I'm allowed to mention the competitors, but don't worry, they're only at 26. And Vega, the guys who had the big bubble in that report, they're only on a 10, so don't feel too bad. It's not tragic if you're in these points. Most of us with a fiber connection or a FOSS LTE will get our pages quickly, but Google is trying to, when everyone is doing everything right in terms of content, SEO and links, how are they going to differentiate the best from the next best? And they use speed. So upping that is key. A WordPress example, we all love WordPress, easy page builder, easy site builder. I did this on the weekend. I set up a brand new website install, scored 99 out the box. As I started adding plugins, every plugin, everything I added just brought the speed right down to 46. I mean, that's still a decent score. You're still in the 40s to 50s, but it just shows how quickly, I didn't even load content on the site. It shows how quickly a site can downgrade in speed. I pulled a couple of things off, got it back to 59. One of our car rental sites, Drive South Africa, Rick worked very hard at the start of lockdown. I think we were in the 30s, and he's literally spent the last 3 to 4 weeks just pruning out all the stuff we don't need, downloading and reducing image size, that unnecessary header of people smiling and having a good time. Strip it out. Just load the site faster so people can do what they need to do. Last pillar of SEO fundamentals, and this has been a real crash course, is UX. Again, I'm going to bring in that EAT principle, where it's not just about how good the content is and how trustworthy the content is. It's the visual cues. Is there adverts and flashing lights and things that make it look untrustworthy, especially in your money, your life verticals like health, finance, things that matter to people's personal lives. They're very tight on authority and how trustworthy a site looks and feels. And like I said earlier, it's not something you do overnight. It's something you work on and develop. It's like developing a brand. It's a digital version of your brand. It's got to be trustworthy. One example of UX which impacting rankings is well documented. I mean, Google's even patented it. You can read about it on their site, patents.google.com, is pogo sticking, where we've all done it. You search for something, you click on the first result, you leave after 2 seconds, it was too slow or didn't answer your question. You move on to the next one, the next one, the next one. Eventually you click on number 5 on the list, you like it, you buy that pair of shoes or whatever it is you're doing. That's pogo sticking. And Google then learns and sees enough people pogo sticking down to number 5. They're going to reward number 5 and bring it up to 4, 3, 2, and eventually number 1 in the rankings. If that site really helps and answers people's questions, the guys that used to be at the top don't really do it so much. And they can track this because you're all using Chrome, you're all using Android, we're all telling Google exactly what we're doing on their sites, and we're helping them build a better machine through it. Okay. Oh, there's one more pillar, but this is really quick. All right, we've got Google Analytics. Everyone has to have it on your site. If you don't know how to use it, there's lots of tutorials. Search Console gives you all the tips, all the little things that are broken or not working on your site. They will literally tell you, this morning, open my phone. There it is, 11th of August. There's a mobile issue on your site. The text is too small to read and the elements are too small, too close together. Google tells you what's wrong with your site if you actually bother to listen. They tell you about keywords people use to search your site. They give you free academies. Google My Business is key to get the spot on the right-hand side. If you're a small business and you haven't registered your business, it's the easiest thing. You've got to compete like hell to be on this side of the results. But if you're on the right-hand side, you own your space. Everyone's going to click there. Straightforward, this article tells people how to do it in 5 simple steps. And that's where you need to start the journey. Reviews is an important aspect. We did this for Drive South Africa also, where this is what it kind of looks like once you've earned enough reviews. And when you search car rental here in South Africa, first 2 spots are taken up by the big international brands, Expedia and Booking.com's rental cars. These guys are literally eating our lunch, to use your phrase from earlier, Wesley. Here we are in South Africa trying to sell our wares, but we're getting interrupted by these big multinational conglomerates. How do I get to the top of the search engines? Hard enough. In terms of organic results, we're number 10 against all the big brands here in South Africa. But through creating really good reviews and offering a genuinely good service, we managed to appear in the 3 box, which gives us a shortcut. It sits below the map item, above all of the big guys, Avis, Budget, Bidvest Car Rental. Here our agency lives sort of in bright lights. Not everyone always clicks here, but certainly on a mobile device, that little element gets a lot of eyeballs and attention. Okay, I think I'm summarizing here and only a few minutes over. So ready to rank, you've got to have your CMS set up, your keywords right, get that HTML and on-page stuff correct. Content and links are fundamental things we do at the beginning, but those are also the things that need to carry on for months and even sometimes years to stay ahead of the competition. Speed, UX, and those Google tools are also foundational things we do right at the start. You need to keep an eye on them over time so that your speed's not going backwards or you're not throwing ugly things at your website and the UX goes backwards too. But next week, we'll look at 4 and 5 in a bit more detail, but this is essentially where we go. So we're now ready to rank. Your site is able to go up, but now next week, we're going to talk about how we go forward. And thank you, Wesley. I think I've just gone over by a little bit, but I hope that covers the foundational stuff. Anyone does want to reach out, I'm here. You can drop me a mail, and I'm happy to see if we can guide you on this journey to success.
Andre, thank you for that. It was fantastic. You really were so practical and helpful. Thanks for lifting the hood on our own SEO. I'm sure our team were taking furious notes there, and let's see how that changes over the coming weeks. Okay. If you guys would have noticed that Rick Harrington, who is actually the marketing manager at Discover Africa, has been answering some of the questions in the background. I'm going to ask Rick just to come on board. We are nearly over time, but there may be just 1 or 2 questions that we can answer live here, Andre and Rick. The first, welcome Rick.
Hi, everyone.
See you there. The first is from Jared Manas. How do I continue to improve a page ranked number 1 on Google? Is it just links, or will adding more or fresh content to this highly ranked page alter its rankings?
I'll have a quick stab and then you go, Rick. Jared, great question. The key is that you've got to do a little bit of everything. You can't only do links. You can't only do content. You've got to keep looking at your whole mix. You know, you don't leave one ingredient out when you bake a loaf of bread. It's going to flop. If you are number 1 for a keyword, wonderful, but you've got to defend that turf and even try and create a gap between you and the next guy to make it harder for them to knock you off. Rick, any?
Yeah, so if I can just jump in there, I think one thing that, Andre, that was great, and I think it covers all the fundamentals. But the one thing that's super important from an SEO perspective is that everyone understand that it is a combination of things. You cannot just do one thing and rank. You have to do all these little small things well, and that will push you up. You have to get speed right. You have to get linking right. You have to get the content right. So you can't just do content and then it'll magically happen. So the same thing with, if you're in position 1, that's great. You've done something right, but you have to keep at it. It's an ongoing process, not a once-off process. That helps.
Fantastic. Thanks, guys. And then let's just answer one more question, because I know we are slightly over time, from Jared, Jared Risen. Hi, Andre. Thanks for this. What are the key things to consider for SEO on a website, WordPress, with mostly dynamic content?
Look, it depends on what you mean by dynamic content. If you're, for instance, in a WooCommerce store and it's dynamic per user, then, you know, I'm adding things to my cart. Then you can't use something like page caching, because that means that one user is going to get a cached version of someone else's dynamic page. I don't know if that's quite what you meant. So that's something just to consider. I would think that all sites, all WordPress sites, are dynamic. I don't know, Rick, do you have anything to add, or kind of how do you interpret that dynamic aspect?
So if you're building a website that has got new fresh pages coming online every day, say in our example, it would be, we're building new itineraries. So you've got new itineraries coming online every day, or new blog posts every day. The most important thing that you can do from a WordPress or CMS perspective is to understand that your core structure needs to be in place first. So if you're going to set up a meta description, that meta description needs to work for every new page that goes live without you having to tweak it manually. So make sure that your core structure's in place before you start producing a hell of a lot of content, because then you know whatever gets produced is always going to run within that structure and follow the right guidelines. So do the planning first, or like our other director always says, measure twice, cut once. It's the same thing with SEO. Don't just go out guns blazing. Make sure you've got everything in place first.
I'm going to ask this last question because I think it's really helpful. It's from Andre van Kets. How risky is it to redesign your website? If you think it needs a new look, how badly could this impact all SEO work that you've done? And can you do this carefully enough to not ruin your previous hard work? That's the next question.
Rick, you go first on this one, because you've been down this road a few times. But yeah.
So it is super dangerous. To be frank, if it's not done correctly. So the first thing is that you need to know is, if you're going to redesign your website, if you're going to switch it across into a new CMS or whatever the case may be, you are going to see 4 to 6 months worth of ranking drop off the bat. Because what's happening is that it's a completely new CMS, completely new structure. So Google has to take 4 to 6 months to figure out what's going on and, you know, give you back your rankings. So you're always going to lose that. But there are ways to mitigate the risk. What you can do is you need to make sure that probably the most important thing that you need to do is to try and keep it as similar in terms of structure as you did on the previous site to the new site. And then you need to make sure that you do a proper 301 redirect. So basically what's happening is you're saying, Google, this is my old page. Google, this is my new page. Redirect this page to that page, because then at least Google has an easy way to go to the new page, if that makes any sense. But at the end of the day, your structure needs to be as close as possible to the old site, so that you don't lose that much traffic. But it is dangerous, so just be careful.
Yeah. Cool, guys. Thank you so much, Andre, Rick. I think that's all we've got time for today. Folks, remember that this is part 1 of a 3-part series. So we're going to be back here next Wednesday at 12 again for part 2. And let's all be taking these amazing tips that Andre and Rick have shared with us now and be applying them to our own sites and seeing what happens in the coming weeks. Great. Andre, again, thank you for your time. Rick, thank you for joining in. We've really enjoyed this.